Good afternoon. We're ready to start the session now. So again, my name is Mr. Omar Sadiq. I work in the Sustainable Urban Development section of the Environment and Development Division here at ESCAP, and I'm pleased to moderate this session, which is very timely and very exciting on the side of the 78th session of the Commission session on high-level dialogue on plastic pollution, next steps to end plastic pollution. Before we start, let me give you a brief overview of the agenda. First, we will hear opening remarks from distinguished leaders from the governments of Japan, Thailand, as well as from the Executive Secretary of ESCAP. Second, we'll hear a scene-setting presentation from UN Environment's Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific. Third, we will hear panelists react to that presentation with speakers from governments of Japan, Thailand, India, and the United States providing interventions. We will then open the floor for selected questions and Q&A. And finally, the UN Environment's Acting Executive Director will summarize the outcomes and close the meeting for us, providing us with next steps for the future path envisioned for the international agreement to end plastic waste pollution. So at this time, let me give you a little bit of information around ESCAP's work on this issue. We have worked on pollution and waste for many decades. However, the sharper focus on plastic pollution emerged thanks to Government of Japan's support directly after the 2019 G20 summit and the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision. At ESCAP, we support effective national and local responses to plastic pollution and guide coordinated action in line with regional priorities and global goals, namely the Sustainable Development Goals. National and local governments with stakeholders leverage our existing regional mechanisms to overcome financial, technical, capacity building, and knowledge barriers identified at the regional level to coordinate coherent regional responses to the global challenge of plastic pollution. We do this by sharing best practices for the prevention and management of plastic pollution and to strengthen and harmonize monitoring of plastic litter sources, flows, and impacts, especially at the urban and regional scale. Today's side event will speak about the path to an international agreement to end plastic pollution. And I sincerely hope our conversation will address the role of all actors along the plastic value chain, as well as existing regional mechanisms that connect the local, national, regional, and global levels for greater coherence in our common goal to end plastic waste. Tackling plastic pollution, ladies and gentlemen, has become a very crowded space. ESCAP with our partners can facilitate coordination across countries, cities, stakeholders, and development actors, develop partnerships, enable peer learning, and build a bridge between local and national action, regional priorities, and global frameworks. With that word, I'm really privileged to introduce today His Excellency Mr. Shingo Miyake, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Government of Japan, to deliver his opening remarks to the side event. Vice Minister, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased Japan and Thailand are co-hosting this high-level dialogue entitled Next Steps to End Plastic Pollution on this occasion of the 78th session of ESCAP. Plastic pollution in marine and other environments has become an urgent issue facing all ESCAP countries, which affects the ecological environment across borders. To promote global effort to address this issue, Japan took the initiative to share the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision at the 2019 G20 summit. This vision aims to reduce to zero additional pollution by marine plastic litter by 2050. The concept of this vision is now shared by 87 countries and regions, including all ESCAP members. But a vision is meaningless if only proposed and not implemented. Under the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, Japan has contributed to compiling measures against marine plastic litter submitted by 42 countries. We also support the steady implementation of these measures, taking into account national circumstances. Furthermore, Japan has supported capacity building and infrastructure development based on local needs in collaboration with international organizations such as ESCAP, UNEP, and UNEP International Environmental Technology Center. For instance, Japan has achieved steady results, including training over 6,000 people engaging in waste management worldwide. In the course of providing this support, Japan has put to use in advanced technologies. Japan has been supporting projects in Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia by utilizing artificial intelligence to monitor plastic litter discharged into rivers and identify discharging points. These projects have been contributing to areas where the world needs to accumulate scientific knowledge, such as the mechanism and measurement of plastic litter discharge from rivers into oceans. In March of this year, the United Nations Environment Assembly adopted a resolution entitled End Plastic Pollution related to the marine environment and negotiations for an internationally legally binding instrument will begin in the second half of this year. I am convinced Japan's experience will help promote effective plastic pollution countermeasures worldwide through the negotiations. In partnership with ESCAP, Japan intends to actively contribute to the negotiations with the participation of major emitters and consuming countries of plastics to encourage measures that meet the circumstances of each country throughout the entire life cycle of plastics. Additionally, to contribute to the negotiations by drawing on Japan's experience, Japan has nominated Mr. Ono Hiroshi, Director General of the Global Environment Bureau, Ministry of the Environment, as a candidate for co-chair of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committees. Mr. Ono has an abundance of professional expertise, has long been involved in the planning and implementation of circular economy policies, including waste management. He also played a significant role in compiling the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision as a G20, which I have just shared with you. After hearing him speak later, I'm sure all participants here will be convinced that Mr. Ono will make a substantial contribution to the negotiations if appointed a co-chair. By utilizing Japanese environmental technology, Japan will contribute to solving the problem of plastics pollution and encourage international discussion. Prime Minister Kishida, he himself has indicated that this is the way Japan will take leadership to resolve global issues. Therefore, Japan will continue to actively promote efforts in this area, including treaty negotiations in line with this policy. Finally, I would like to conclude my remarks by expressing my hope that discussions among you all from government, industry, academia, and non-governmental shareholders during today's dialogue will be fruitful in providing the next steps for ESCAP efforts and the treaty negotiations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Vice Minister, for your opening remarks. I would now like to introduce Dr. Oramuj Lor Fensri, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, Royal Government of Thailand, to deliver her opening remarks, and she will do so online.
His Excellency Miyake Shingo, Parliamentary Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan, Ms. Amida Sochia Alice Javana, Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Ms. Dechen Sering, Regional Director of Asia Pacific UNEP, distinguished delegations, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Ministry of Natural Resource and Environment, Thailand, I would like to convey my sincere gratitude to Embassy of Japan and United Nations of Environmental Program, UNEP, for inviting Thailand to co-host the side event of the 78th session of Commission entitled High-Level Dialogue on Plastic Pollution. Next step to end plastic pollution. I am highly appreciate your continuous support and assistance regarding waste and marine plastic waste management throughout the new international legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution. Plastic pollution has reached crisis level and is having significant consequence for the environment, human health, economics, and community in the regions. To address this issue, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment Thailand paying attention to the management of plastic waste, both at the national and Asian level. The Roadmap on Plastic Waste Management 2018 to 2030 and the first phase of the Action Plan on Plastic Waste Management 2020-2022 were developed to serve as a framework and direction for preventing and solving of plastic waste in the country. Plastic waste management is linked to human behavior and people's livelihoods, which is very much complexity. Solving the problem of plastic waste requires addressing the root cause of the problem. Reduce of using plastic is the first priority. Then we must consider the whole life cycle management along with the settle, the laws and regulations. Thailand's driven the voluntary-based measures on plastic waste management for a long time and achieve a certain level. Therefore, mandatory-based measures such as law and regulation enforcement should also be considered on plastic waste management. Another important problem that challenged the Thai government is the import of plastic waste. Although we need plastic scrap as raw material for recycling industry, we found that large amount of imported plastic scrap was illegal and intentionally used as a waste dump. At present, our ministry is solving this issue through the Subcommittee on Plastic Waste and Electronic Waste Management under the National Environmental Board. The policy on banning the import of plastic scrap was announced since October 2020. Currently, it is on the process of reviewing the policy and measure to regulate the import of the plastic scrap, which appropriate and in accordance with the situation before the submitting to the National Environmental Board for consideration and submission to the Cabinet accordingly. Banning the import of plastic scrap is the important measure in order to prepare domestic plastic scrap for use as a raw material in the factory according to the circular economy concept under the policy of driving Thailand with the BCG economic model. Regarding the new international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, Thailand wishes to emphasize once again that we are ready to work with all member states to develop the new instrument which address the full life cycle management approach of plastic, including production, design, and disposal, as well as the design of reusable and recyclable product and material. Ministry of Natural Resource and Environment Thailand engaged with all sectors in solving the plastic waste problem for their entire life cycle approach by cooperation with all stakeholders both in the governmental, administrative, and legislative system to show that Thailand value and potential in environmentally sound management of plastic at the national, regional, and also global levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Permanent Secretary, for your opening remarks. It's now my extreme pleasure to introduce Ms. Armida Salisa Alice Jabana, Undersecretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, to deliver her opening remarks. ES, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Omar. Excellency, Mr. Shingo Miyake, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan, distinguished panelists, speakers, as well as distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my pleasure to join this side event on the high-level dialogue on plastic pollution, next steps to end plastic pollution, the topic of which is very timely, very important. I appreciate very much the government of Japan for this initiative in close collaboration with UNEP as well as ESCAP for organizing this event. Plastic pollution is indeed one of the most pressing, most urgent development challenges, especially in our region. It is permeating our urban and marine environments, adversely and negatively impacting the health of our population, ecosystem, and therefore also threatening lives and livelihoods. But as special speakers already alluded earlier, and as we understand, every one of us understand that member states at the fifth session of UNEA not too long ago adopted the resolution to work towards an international legally binding agreement on plastic pollution, demonstrating at least, the very least, political commitment to meet these global challenges. But I understand that we are given like 2 years here to work on this. So therefore, again, this side event is very timely as it aims to share ideas on what priorities the agreement could cover that are important from our perspective, from especially the Asia Pacific perspective. The contribution and solution generated in our region are critical to the future success of any agreement because it will also fit into the topic areas that can be covered in that agreement. So today's event builds the momentum for the future negotiation on plastic pollution and will explore steps to reduce additional pollution by marine plastic litter to zero by 2050. This is in line with the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision developed under the leadership of the government of Japan. So reducing plastic pollution also contributes to the achievement of SDGs for sure, and not only one goal, but multiple goals. The resolution adopted by UNEA puts in motion the process to develop the specific content. This is important. So to develop a process to develop the specific content of a new plastic pollution treaty with the aim of completing the work by the end of 2024, so in 2 years' time. The resolution emphasizes that the problem should be solved through measures along the entire life cycle of plastic. So therefore, efforts from this region are helping to develop such measures. Just to give a quick example, what we've been doing and supporting this effort, just one a very brief example of ESCAP work on closing the loop project, financed by the government of Japan, made substantial progress in providing target cities and key stakeholders in several cities in especially Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, with data, knowledge, and skills to monitor and manage plastic waste using innovative technology and to better understand policy intervention that can reduce plastic waste. So therefore, all this initiative best practice can fit into the suggestion to be accommodated in the upcoming treaty discussion. So with that, I'm very much looking forward to a further deliberation in this very important event. And again, thank you very much for your participation and contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Secretary Alice Jabana, for your opening remarks. I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Dechen Sharing, Regional Director and Representative, Asia Pacific Office for the United Nations Environment Program. And Ms. Sharing is going to deliver for us a scene-setting presentation, which is going to introduce but also remind all of us on the background of the internationally legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, UNEA 5.2. You have the floor.
Okay, so a very good afternoon, Your Excellency, Mr. Shingo Miyake, Parliamentary Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, Your Excellency, Dr. Oranuj Lorpensri, Deputy Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Natural Resources. Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen, I have a pleasure to present a scene-setting presentation on member states' adoption of the resolution End Plastic Pollution towards an internationally legally binding instrument. Next slide, please. If we start to look at the Asia-Pacific region, it's crucial to combating plastic pollution. Almost half of the global plastic produced has its origin in our region, and it leads to really high per capita plastic pollution consumption. So the annual global production and incineration of plastic is estimated to contribute more than 1.7 gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions in 2015. And if you look at that, that would be the world's fourth largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. If we continue on the current course, emissions will eat up to 15% of the global carbon budget. Plastic also has a direct and deadly effect on wildlife and biodiversity, and we're estimating every year we generate 220 million tons of plastic waste. It's set to double by 2040, so the science is clear. We have to address plastic pollution. Next. So in March this year, an honorable minister and Ibu Armida mentioned it was a historic UN Environment Assembly resolution to end plastic pollution, creating a pathway to establish an intergovernmental negotiating committee to prepare a legally binding global agreement by the end of 2024. Next. This agreement will cover the full life cycle of plastics, from how you produce plastic, how you use it, collect it, recycle it, end of life management. And what was critical in the discussions in the resolution was acknowledging the role of both public and private sector in creating a circular plastic economy. And the resolution looked at enhanced international collaboration, facilitated access to technology, capacity building, scientific and technical cooperation. And also it was really clear that a lot of the Rio principles were recognized and that there is no single approach. Next, please. So if you look at the next 2 years, member states will consider proposals, will negotiate, will decide on the way forward. They've agreed on a 2024 timeline. And if you look at the timeline, it's a challenging and ambitious timeline, and it will require a lot of hard work. We expect countries to intensively work to reach an agreement on a comprehensive approach that addresses the full life cycle of plastics within a formal legal agreement. And what was very clear in the resolution was a role of multi-stakeholder dialogue. So there really is an understanding that with many multilateral environmental agreements, you set goals and you think about implementation, that we take the multi-stakeholder along the process. Next, please. So the open-ended working group will take place from 30th May to 1st June, which is next week, hosted by the government of Senegal with generous funding support from Switzerland. And if you look at the open-ended working group, we will discuss the preparations of the work for the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. We will look at timelines. We will look at draft rules of procedure. We'll look at the organizations of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meetings. And throughout these meetings, there will be diverse multi-stakeholder dialogues planned to include the widest, most effective participation possible. While and this meeting will be held in hybrid fashion, so there will be physical participation in Dhaka, Senegal, but you can also participate online. We've already looked at many countries from our region will be participating, and as already mentioned, we have leadership from the governments of Japan, the governments of Thailand, and many other countries in this region. Next, please. Next slide. So if you look at effective implementation of the instrument will be key to the success, and the region already, our region is already contributing to coordinating, monitoring, reporting of the instrument, providing technical and financial support. We've already had many UNEP projects, and there are many projects of other multilateral environmental organizations. And these projects have laid the ground, the science, data, and a groundswell of support from communities, local and national government. Next slide, please. So the government of Japan, countermeasures 1 and 2 was funded with generous support of the government of Japan. Next, please. And here, really, if you look at some of the knowledge products, and you look across the Ganges, the Mekong, and in Sri Lanka, there were surveys of 2,200 plastic leakage hotspots mapped. Results were presented to stakeholders, and decision making, both at local and national levels, were able to look at the results. We had a lot of outreach work. In India alone, we had a Better Than Plastic campaign in December 2021, and in 2 weeks, we reached over 900,000 views. And in Chiang Rai, in northern Thailand, the Geoinformatics Center of the Asian Institute of Technology, through the project Countermeasures, installed CCTV cameras to pilot automated monitoring of plastic pollution using artificial intelligence tools developed under the project. And these results will inform options for the pollution monitoring mechanism of the Mekong River Commission. Next, please. There's been a wide multi-stakeholder network already established, local international partners, governments, universities, NGOs, and companies to conduct research and to develop recommendations. Next, please. Another important regional initiative is Sea Circular. It's a project with UNEP and the coordinating body on seas of East Asia. And the focus is to inspire market-based solutions and really to look at interventions enhancing science-based for decision-making, and looking at really working towards a circular economy. And when we talk about a circular economy, it's really about systemic transformation. This is not a problem that we will recycle our way out of. We've all gotten used to an economic system that allows us to manufacture products, versatile and durable materials, to use it for a few minutes and then to dispose it as if disposal was free. But the cost of that disposal is borne by the whole of society. So we really need, through circular economy, to bring sense to the system. How do we tax the use of resources and pollution rather than the labor cost to keep the resources circulating? We need industry innovating on safe circular systems, reusing the same products over and over again. We need to reduce the need to make new products, and we need regulations to allow safe circulation of products and materials. Next, please. So every year we have we've been holding an annually occurring partnership event, Sea of Solutions. And really, it's a place in this region where we have a multi-stakeholder dialogue to lead to innovation, holistic solutions. We've had governments, private sector corporations, civil society groups, NGOs, and the process is to support our good governance policy making. These events have really been useful because it's actually showcased what is already happening, and there's a lot of really good work happening. Next, please. So in conclusion, you ask, why do we need a global treaty to end plastic pollution? We have many voluntary initiatives. Almost all of the top 50 fast-moving consumer good companies are undertaking plastic packaging initiatives. We have over 200 businesses accounting for 20% of global annual plastic packaging signing on to the 2025 targets under the New Plastic Economy Global Commitment. But these voluntary initiatives alone cannot drive the system change we need. Current efforts do not aggregate to deliver the desired global change of preventing all plastic leakage to the environment by a certain date. So we're looking at a global agreement that can create enabling conditions to eliminate plastic leakage into the environment. We're looking at a global agreement that will have an overarching objective, time-bound goals with specific dates, which in turn will lead to clear national targets and action plans that will aggregate to deliver on the global overarching objective. We look forward to all your participation in this very ambitious and exciting process. Thank you, Omar.
Thank you, Ms. Charing, for that very clear presentation for what will indeed be a very ambitious and exciting process. We would now move to the panel discussion, where we are privileged to have 3 member state representatives with us today, both in the room and online, to discuss how to support solutions for plastic pollution and their ideas, hopes regarding the future legally binding agreement. So I would now like to introduce Mr. Hiroshi Ono, Director General, Global Environmental Bureau, Ministry of Environment, Japan, to deliver his presentation online. Mr. Ono, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you all the distinguished participants of this important side event. I'm delighted to share with you the role Japan has been playing and my aspirations for the international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. The adoption of the UN resolution End Plastic Pollution was a landmark achievement towards ending plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. In the build-up, Japan proposed a draft resolution providing the basis of discussions at UNEA 5.2 and contributed to facilitating and navigating the negotiations. The resolution draws the starting line for the negotiation. The resolution draws the starting line for the negotiation at the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. It is one of the fruits of the efforts of previous international, regional, and national initiatives to tackle plastic pollution. In particular, the core concept and approach of the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision and its implementation framework are well reflected in it, namely the concept of wise use of plastics and no leakage to the environment, and country-driven implementation. The resolution also identified basic approaches and elements to be included and considered in the instrument, which very well accommodate the views and needs of all countries engaged in the negotiation in Nairobi. Among them, let me point out several key elements which would be necessary for a successful international instrument from Japan's perspective. First, a time-bound, clear, and ambitious common goal towards the elimination of plastic pollution. One good example is the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, which is already shared by more than 80 countries and regions. Second, an emphasis on inclusiveness, ensuring the participation of all countries and the collaboration with various stakeholders, including civil society, academia, and the private sector. Third, addressing the full life cycle of plastics from design production to waste management in a well-balanced manner. Fourth, obligation for all countries to develop and report national action plans that are mutually comparable, together with necessary support for their development and implementation. I hope those elements would be fully incorporated in the instrument. Japanese Parliamentary Vice Minister Miyake, in his opening statement, highlighted our broad support to developing countries, including ESCAP member states. Let me elaborate on this issue. Many studies point out that the main causes of plastic leakage to the environment are mismanagement waste due, for instance, to fraud collection and treatment system and the lack of capacity in its operation. This fact indicates improving waste management systems together with enhancing resource efficiency and circularity of economy can have a dramatic effect in reducing plastic pollution into the environment. The ASEAN region and ESCAP member countries has long been tackling marine plastic litter. Building upon the Bangkok Declaration on combating marine plastic debris in the ASEAN region, which was adopted at the ASEAN Summit in 2019, as well as the ASEAN Framework of Action on Marine Debris. The ASEAN Regional Action Plan was developed in 2021. I very much appreciate the continued commitment and concrete efforts of ASEAN member states, as well as ESCAP member states. Based on the ASEAN Plus 3 Marine Plastic Litter Cooperation Action Initiative, Japan has been providing various support for ASEAN countries. Let me highlight a few examples. Over the past 5 years, training for ocean monitoring has been provided to many experts, including 14 experts from Thailand. In 2019, the Regional Knowledge Center on Marine Plastic Litter was established in Jakarta, which serves as an information hub for ASEAN Plus 3 countries, hosted by AREA, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. I have long been engaged in such activities, which led me to holding a strong belief that building an international framework should go hand in hand with the concrete projects and actions addressing ground level needs. Now, I would like to turn to my candidacy as introduced by Parliamentary Vice Minister Miyake. With great honor and personal joy, I have been nominated by the government of Japan as candidate for the co-chair of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to develop an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. This really is a challenging task, but I'm ready to accept the challenge. I'm optimistic because all countries are fully aware of this issue, and most of them have already been implementing various measures and actions. Recalling the constructive atmosphere of the negotiations in Nairobi, I'm confident that we can create an ambitious and effective framework by the end of 2024 that is embraced by all countries. Thank you very much for your attention and support.
Thank you, Mr. Ono, for your presentation, and congratulations on your appointment as co-chair. No doubt you will be a champion for the region. I would now like to introduce Ms. Tiraporn Wiriwutikorn, who is a specialist on waste and hazardous substance management, Pollution Control Department, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, Royal Government of Thailand, to deliver her presentation. Ms. Wiriwutikorn, I hope you can hear us. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and His Excellency Miyake Shinko, Parliamentary Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Aranut Lopensi, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, Thailand, Ms. Arinda Sasi Arishabaria, Executive Secretary of ESCAP Thailand, and the Ms. Dechen Sering, UNEP Regional Director for Asia Pacific, dear panelists and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Pollution Control Department Thailand, today I would like to share with you Thailand views on the new legally binding instrument on plastic pollution elements. Next, please. Before that, I would like to touch a bit upon what we have done on plastic waste management and what would be considered at INC1 and what elements that the new instrument should cover. First, next please. During the last next please. During the last decade, average amount of plastic waste generated in Thailand approximately 2,000 tons per year, or 12% of total municipal solid waste generation in Thailand, and allow 1/4 of 2 million material recovery and energy recovers, and the rest are mostly single-use plastic. For example, plastic bag, plastic cup, plastic straw, plastic boxes, foam food container, and those were disposed by landfilling or incinerator and partially accumulated in dumping site. Then Thailand has developed the roadmap on plastic waste management that cover since 2018 till 2030 to serve as a framework and direction for preventing and solving of plastic waste problem in the country. And this picture shows activity timelines of the roadmap and also the principle and the device phase of implementation. The key principles applied for this roadmap development are life cycle approach, 3R principle, public-private partnership, concept of circular economy, and responsible consumption and production. The first phase of the roadmap is 2019. It was the prohibition of using capsule on the plastic bottle, also degradable plastic, and microbead in the products, cosmetic products. The second phase is in 2022 is to prohibit of using polystyrene foam food container, plastic straw, plastic bag, which is thickness less than 36 micron, and plastic cup with its thickness is less than 100 micron. The third phase is beyond 2022, focus mainly on the raise up of the recycling rate of targeted plastic waste by 100% in the year of 2027 to serve circularity economic concept. And under this roadmap, next please, we have submit the action plan cover 2020 to 2022 to the cabinet for approval, and two targets include in this action plan. First is to reduce and stop using 4 types of targeted plastic by replacing with environmental friendly materials. Second, to meet 50% recycle rate of 4 types of plastic waste by 2022. And To achieve these two targets, we have 3 control measures in the action plan. First, reduction of plastic waste at source. Second, reduction at the consumption phase. And third is dealing with the post-consumption phase or at the plastic waste management. Next, please. What would be considered at the INC 1? We will have OEWG as we just heard from the first speaker next week to prepare for the INC. And I think next, please, the plan and expected outcomes in each INC and intersectional clauses between each INC should be considered, should be prepared and adopted at INC 1. So it means that we have already the proposed option, 2 options. We have 5 or 4 INC until the final version of the instrument will be addressed. And so we should plan well what would be considered in each INC, what would be the specific task during the INC or intersectional work during the INC. Secondly, structures or type of the instrument should be considered. It should be conventions, it should be cover measure and annex, or it should be convention plus protocols, basic structure provision in convention, and specific obligation or measure in protocols, or the other types of instrument should be discussed and considered. Next, the objectives of the instrument, what that we would like to achieve, what the ultimate goal, the ultimate aims of this instrument. Overall objective, specific objectives should be identified. And last is the conceptual framework of the instrument. Key obligation should be identified, should be discussed. That means we can decide the composition of the provision in the instrument in the next INC. Next, please. And when we talk about the instrument, we should consider the following element next. The concept of broad scope of the instrument, definitely plastic pollution that we already have a UNIA 5.2 5/14 resolution. Plastic pollution include microplastic, plastic pollution in definitely not only marine, but also other environment as well. The principle that already guiding in the resolution is fully life cycle management approach of plastic should be taken into account. Circular economy should be taken into account, and we should not forget the related existing various declaration related to the plastic waste, marine debris, and the initial project program on that, and also the existing multi-environmental agreements that related to, for example, Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm Conventions, Rio Declaration, COP36 regarding the neutral of carbon in the future. And because plastic pollution can be transferred in nature, so the life cycle approach is necessary to be considered. Next, please. The general information of that should be considered in the instrument, the scope of provision, scope of the instrument, objective definitions related to plastic pollution, overarching principle, requirement, or maybe the national action plan, the guideline, the technique, and reporting, monitoring and evaluation of the successful of the instrument, technical and financial assistance mechanism, the organization or the conference of the party or the international conference under the new instrument, and necessary subsidiary body, for example, the technical body, technical expert body, scientific bodies. Next, please. The control measures that should be thinking about and should be discussed, starting from the design and at the phase of the production, how to avoid unnecessary material, problematic plastic, mostly get prone and harmful items that put in the plastic product, and maybe the regulation, how to regulate the product design standard, the reduction of plastic waste at source by minimize total volume of plastic waste, produce, use, and dispose of, phasing out ban by mandatory measures, reduction the use of single-use plastic at consumption phase, labeling required, promote reduced single-use plastic. At the post-consumption phase or waste management, how to promote innovation for recyclable, friendly, circular economy, use of recycled material as primary input in the plastic production, minimum requirement for waste management standard or collection, starting from collection, segregation, dispose of, and the control of transboundary movement of hazardous waste that complement to the Basel Convention, or promotion of innovation of environmentally sound alternatives, introduction of economic instrument and incentive, and in determining of recommendation for the priority and next slide please, for the priority as the order of discussion of the instrument, the national circumstance and capabilities on plastic waste management should consider the need of developing countries, especially increase national capacity in terms of full life cycle management through technical and financial assistance, technical transfer, and promoting cooperation among related multi-stakeholder, multi-sector, and related parties. The instrument should be based on precautionary approach and a principle of common but differentiates responsibility, as well as should recognize the devastating and frequency or irreversible impact of plastic pollution on ecosystem, on climate, and livelihoods. The instrument should cover all recognize, mutual recognize international gaps and complement and enhance existing instruments while avoiding duplication of efforts. Also provide a phase-out period for economic adaptation of the measure in the instrument. Global agreement needs the same level of harmonized reporting and monitoring as well. In addition, the instrument must be along with the government policy, national strategy, and national plastic waste management action plan, and need cooperation and coordination with multi-stakeholder and multi-sectors. That's all for the reflection from Thailand on the new legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Weir Wittikorn, for those important reflections and also very sharp recommendations. We'll now move to the final panelist for the side event, and it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Evan Fox, Economic Officer of the Embassy of the United States of America to Thailand. Mr. Fox.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and thank you to everyone here this afternoon. Thank you to my colleagues from Thailand, Japan, and the United Nations Environmental Program for your hard work to organize this afternoon's side event on the important issue of addressing plastic pollution in the marine environment. And I just want to say up front that I think a lot of what you'll hear me say reflects the previous speaker's remarks, and I think a real coming together on this particular topic. Thank you again to everyone for organizing it. Let me say up front that the United States supports negotiations on a global legal instrument to combat ocean plastic pollution, and that we were proud to be one of the 175 nations that agreed to forge a legally binding treaty to tackle plastic pollution at the United Nations Environmental Assembly 5.2 last March that was already mentioned. As we all know and has been emphasized here today, plastic pollution is a global problem and one that we're acutely aware of in the Asia-Pacific region. I was surprised to hear the statistic about 50% of plastic waste coming from this part of the world. And according to the United Nations, the world produces overall 300 million tons of plastic waste each year, and almost as much of that weight is the same weight as every single person on the planet. More than 8 million tons of plastic pollution enter the ocean each year, an amount that is expected to increase until the world takes immediate action to reverse this global trend. Scientific evidence overwhelmingly shows that plastic pollution has wide-ranging effects with impacts to environmental and food security, maritime transportation, tourism, economic stability, resource management, and potentially human health. As our United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced last November, the United States supports negotiations on a global treaty that is innovative, ambitious, provides flexibility for countries contributing to a common objective through their own national action plans. I'd like to say that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to mitigate and prevent the discharge of plastic into our ocean. It's clear to see that countries cannot solve this problem on their own, and we need high ambition at the global level, along with robust actions by governments and stakeholders, including from the private sector, to be successful in this effort. Following on the historic agreement at UNEA in March, the United States is committed to working with other nations and stakeholders to fight plastic pollution. And from our own part, we're already acting both domestically and internationally to focus on this global challenge. Turning first to the domestic side, the United States government has taken a broad interagency approach to address plastic waste with robust programming from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, our National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and the Departments of Energy, Agriculture, and Interior, among others. We even have our NASA scientists working hard to track microplastics, as you can see on this map. Turning to the international side, the United States is working with nations in the Asia-Pacific region to build capacity that would be required to comply with a new internationally binding agreement. A prime example of this is our US-Singapore third country training program, which last year supported a workshop focused on ASEAN's plastic pollution challenge and the importance of promoting integrated solid waste management strategies for creating sustainable local and regional solutions. The United States is also working through regional mechanisms, which led to the establishment of the APEC Marine Debris Management and Innovation Subfund in 2018. Through an initial U.S. contribution of $800,000, the United States State Department was able to generate additional contributions and replenishments for other APEC members, allowing countries to access program funds each year to address marine plastic pollution. USAID has also played a significant role in programming in this space, including through our Clean Cities Blue Ocean program and its predecessor, the Municipal Waste Recycling Program, which worked to reduce land-based sources of ocean plastic pollution in 4 key countries, including Indonesia, Philippines, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. I'd like to emphasize that private sector engagement is also key, and in 2019, USAID launched an agreement leveraging more than $100 million in private sector investment managed by Circulate Capital and funded by multinational companies. Working with the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, or DFC, USAID provides a $35 million, 50% loan portfolio guarantee, which incentivizes private sector investment in the recycling value chain in South and Southeast Asia. These U.S. initiatives help demonstrate some of the key elements, which I've heard echoed today for consideration in our continued efforts to address plastic waste. There's interagency collaboration, there's capacity building, there's leveraging regional frameworks, and then there's private sector engagement. We should also consider the circular economy analysis, which I also heard emphasized today, and approaches that reduce the life cycle impacts of plastic, including climate impacts. Using that analysis, we can assess potential risks associated with plastics and determine how to effectively reduce consumption, seeking to create a healthier, more just future for all. And I'm happy to note that Thailand, one of our hosts today, is helping to lead this kind of thinking through their biocircular green economy model, which is prominently featured in their chairmanship of APEC this year, and helps to lay the groundwork for continued discussions during the U.S. chairmanship of APEC next year in 2023. The United States is committed to playing a leadership role within the international community, working alongside countries like Japan to address these kinds of difficult problems, as emphasized during our Our Ocean conference in April, which we co-hosted with the Republic of Palau, which closed with more than 400 commitments, totaling more than $16 billion to address some of the world's most pressing challenges, including hundreds of millions of dollars in new U.S. programs to address plastic waste. So I'd like to conclude again today by thanking the organizers and reiterating the importance of forums like the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, or UNESCAP, for facilitating these important conversations. And just to end on a more personal note, as our Assistant Secretary of State in the Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs, Monica Medina, put it at UNEA, it is, quote, the beginning of the end of the scourge of plastic on this planet. We will look back on this day for our children and our grandchildren. It's up to us to make this planet a more beautiful place. Thank you.
Very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Fox. We are running late on time, and I know that delegates have to go back to the plenary session. However, we have time for one short intervention from Mr. Satendra Kumar, who is the Director at the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India. Mr. Kumar, you have the floor. Can I ask you to have a brief intervention? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. A very good afternoon to all, and Your Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Plastic pollution has been one of the most serious environmental challenges of current times before all of us. It has its adverse impacts on human health and environment, and unless we address this problem thoroughly, it has the potential to affect the sustainability of the life on the planet. We may face the challenges of food security, ecological integrity, ecological health, and likewise many other problems. Addressing the plastic pollution is recognized as a global environment challenge. The resumed session of the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly, UNIA 5.2, held in February-March 2022, considered 3 draft resolutions to address plastic pollution. And one of the draft resolutions under the consideration was that of India. The draft resolution submitted by India called for immediate collective voluntary actions by countries. In that assembly, India engaged constructively with all member states to develop consensus on the resolution for driving global action on plastic pollution by setting up of the Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee for a new international legally binding treaty. On the insistence of India, the principle of national circumstances accountability while taking actions to address plastic pollution was included in the text of the resolution to allow developing countries follow their development trajectories. India also stood for not mandating the Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee with the development of targets, definitions, formats, and methodologies at this stage, prejudging the outcome of deliberations of the committee. The provision for immediate collective voluntary actions by the countries was also included to address plastic pollution on an urgent and continual basis. After long protracted negotiations, the principal objectives of India's draft resolutions were sufficiently addressed in the resolution on end plastic pollution towards an international legally binding instrument adopted in the UNIA 5.2. The UNIA 5.2 would be remembered for agreeing for collective global action and terming the adoption of this resolution. Our Honorable Environment Minister, Shri Bhupender Yadav, sir, said that under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister India, Shri Narendra Modi, India had already embarked on the journey to end plastic pollution by taking sound and effective measures through EPR on plastic packaging, as well as putting a ban on the single-use plastic items having low utility and high littering potential. Under the resolution, the member states have been called to continue to step up activities and adopt voluntary measures to combat plastic pollution, including measures related to sustainable consumption and production, and which may include circular economy approaches and developing and implementing national action plans for international action and initiatives under respective national regulatory frameworks, and also on a voluntary basis to provide statistical information on environmentally sound management of plastic waste as appropriate, taking into account their national circumstances. Under the leadership of our Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, India has taken resolute steps to address plastic pollution, and I would like to highlight a few things about it. The guidelines on extended producer responsibility coupled with prohibition of identified single-use plastic items are important steps for reducing pollution caused due to littered plastic waste, not only in India, but across the globe if adopted similarly. The guidelines provide framework to strengthen circular economy of plastic packaging waste, promote development of new alternative to plastics, and provide further next steps for moving towards sustainable plastic packaging by businesses. Reuse of rigid plastic packaging material has been mandated in the guidelines to reduce the use of fresh plastic material for packaging. The enforceable prescription of minimum level of recycling of plastic packaging waste collected under EPR along with the use of recycled plastic content will further reduce plastic consumption and support recycling of the plastic packaging waste. I would like to mention that India has requested and urged the member states of Asia Pacific region of the United Nations to,
if you could please conclude.
To consider India's membership as a bureau in the International Negotiation Committee. We must look for the things that duplicacy is not there in such negotiations. We should map the existing efforts and what are the existing mechanisms for monitoring and reporting. And we need to create mechanisms for technology transfer and the financial mechanisms that would support the transition of all the countries to move and adopt the mechanisms as prescribed in the treaty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Kumar. I'd like to now thank all the panelists for their rich presentations and for being so open with us and providing inspiring examples, which really speak to the national and local commitments to set up action on plastic waste pollution and highlights really Asia-Pacific's strong support for an internationally legally binding instrument that ends plastic waste pollution. I now would like to invite Ms. Sonia Leighton-Kone, Acting Deputy Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program, who has the challenge to sum up this rich presentation for me and provide us with a summary of today's outcomes and next steps to close the session. Ms. Leighton-Kone, over to you.
Thank you, Omar. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure, Omar, if I could do justice to summarizing the very rich conversations and interventions we've had. But indeed, I'm honored to have been invited to speak at this high-level dialogue on plastic pollution and indeed to listen to the various perspectives that the panelists have shared. We are in the midst of a complicated and deeply entrenched relationship with plastic. We know how harmful plastic is, but somehow we can't imagine our lives without it. It's kind of an addiction of sorts. And that's because plastic is an incredible material. It's cheap, it's lightweight, durable, and easy to make. Our food lasts longer because of it. Modern medicine would not exist without it. But this very entrenched relationship that humans have with plastic has consequences as well, and that's what we've been discussing. What once made plastic so revolutionary is now creating a vicious cycle of irresponsible production, overconsumption, and waste that is devastating human health and the living world. Today, you'll find plastic everywhere it shouldn't be. It's in the food we eat, the water we drink, it's in our stomachs, our lungs, and even our blood. So since humankind has begun its relationship with plastics, we've produced about 9 billion tons of plastic, and about 1/3 of that is used only once. The straw in your drink, for example, it's probably used for less than 10 minutes, and a plastic bag for less than an hour. Recycling rates are troublingly low, so the crisis of plastic pollution is getting worse and worse. By 2050, there will be more plastic in the world's ocean than fish. We are rapidly running out of time to deliver real change. Our addiction, if I can call it that, to plastic is one of the defining environmental crises of our time. Plastic waste and the production of plastic is rapidly undermining efforts to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, poverty, and inequality. People in low and middle income countries are increasingly at risk. Burning plastic waste in open air pits releases toxic gases that cause cancer, heart disease, asthma, emphysema, and damage to our nervous systems. Industrial incineration devastates lives. Plastic pollution has also created major economic challenges. Fisheries and the tourism sector are getting hit hard. The cost for waste and wastewater management is increasing. Like other emergencies I've worked on, the poor and most marginalized are being hit the hardest. That is why the resolution at the UN Environment Assembly is so crucial. It is the first to call for an internationally legally binding instrument on plastic pollution across the life cycle and crucially in the marine environment. We are full steam ahead. The committee tasked with negotiating the details will begin work during the second half of this year. And we have already begun preparations with a meeting of the open-ended working group happening in Senegal at the end of this month. A diplomatic conference of plenipotentiaries will be organized in 2025 so that member states can sign on to the legally binding instrument. Key to the success of the resolution will be the engagement of the widest and most effective participation possible in both the working group and the work of the International Negotiating Committee. So today's high-level dialogue is a crucial step in that direction, and we thank you. I'm deeply grateful for the governments of Japan and Thailand for hosting this event, and to His Excellency Miyake Shingo, Japan's Parliamentary Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jatporn Buspat, Thailand's Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, Ms. Armida Salasia Alice Jabana, Executive Secretary, UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia the Pacific, and colleagues from India, Japan, Thailand, and the USA. Thank you very much for kickstarting the conversation in the region, for giving us the chance to harness the region's wisdom and guidance. We know from the living world that in diversity lies strength. Our best chance at ending plastic pollution lies in our ability to bring together a diverse array of voices from government, civil society, business, and academia. This is a real opportunity to show that multilateralism is still fit for purpose, that it can transform some of the greatest challenges of our time into opportunities. So let's mark the high water point, the moment we finally come together to beat the tsunami of plastic waste. Let us transform the cultures and values that underpin the crisis, and let us overhaul how we consume and produce materials so that they no longer devastate our health and well-being. This is the power that we will have with the legally binding instrument. Let us use it wisely. Arigato gozaimasu.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leighton Kone. The meeting is now closed. I wish all the delegates and audience members a successful ESCAP Commission session. Thank you.